Did you see this from PragerU? Oh yeah, I saw this. I actually wonder about this, dude. Is PragerU trying to get booted off Twitter for like the oppression points or whatever? What the fuck? Twitter is banning conservative accounts, but allowing tweets calling for the death of American politicians, the deaths of police, national revolt, and blacks to burn down the country. What the fuck, dude? Damn. I thought it was Antifa rioters that were burning down the country. Remember that narrative that they pushed for months, that black people actually didn't care about BLM and all the violence and all the confrontation with police was being done by Antifa? Because that way they could pretend that they weren't opposing a civil rights movement. But now they admit it was the black people, except to them it's the blacks, you know? Is blacks bad? My mom definitely says it. If you're like quickly talking, you say, oh, whites and blacks, like I don't think it's a big deal. But when you're saying shit like the blacks are gonna burn down the country, I think the implication there is pretty clear. You know, I feel like PragerU is just a couple of tweets away from saying shit like we need to protect white women from the blacks or something like that. It's really funny when they tweeted this too, because like the protesters at the Capitol were calling to hang Mike Pence. They killed a police officer. They instigated a national revolt. The only thing they didn't do was blacks burn down the country, because there weren't any black people at that fucking Capitol riot. That's for fucking sure. Don't hold me to that. If you scan the thousands of people, you can probably find like one black guy. Yeah, that one guy. Oh God, it's pretty dumb. If they voted Trump, they wouldn't be black. Yeah, true. The melanin would have been stolen from them. PragerU is pro-slavery. So yeah, did you guys ever see that PragerU video where they said the 3/5 compromise was actually anti-slavery? This really bothers me when people talk about it really bothers me when people talk about like racism, like it's this hyper-specific, very alienated, very distant social phenomena that is exhibited only in the worst people, okay? I genuinely believe that like maybe a quarter of the Republican Party would be pro-slavery if they thought they could get away with it. Like if they could like pop it back in, about a quarter of the Republican Party, more or less, would be like, oh yeah, okay, this is probably like the way the world should work. I genuinely believe that. A lot of people, they propagate this like myth, and to be honest, I used to as well, where like all Trump supporters are just like they have economic anxieties and they're just concerned about the world and they've been led astray. I don't think that's true. The average Trump supporter is wealthier than the average Biden supporter, like by a decent margin too. And additionally, Trump hasn't been like campaigning off of economic anxiety. When does Trump talk about making life better for the working class, except when he talks about bringing in manufacturing jobs back to America? Apart from that one very narrow sliver of the working class, he doesn't talk about it. The vast majority of what he talks about is race baiting. He talks about suburbs. He talks about the border. He talks about China, which I guess isn't race baiting. It's more xenophobia. Especially now, he really doesn't talk about economic anxiety that much. It's pretty much racial animus. But a lot of lefties don't want to talk about that. A lot of lefties want to pretend that like Trump supporters are purely motivated by like a lack of class consciousness. Because if they pretend that, they don't have to acknowledge the really uncomfortable fact that there are just a lot of Americans who just fucking hate black people. Like they really genuinely do. I wonder if we could look up the rate of like interracial marriage approval. Hold on. Interracial marriage approval. Are we still doing these polls? They didn't stop in like the 90s, I hope. In the US, 87% of people approve black-white marriage versus 4% in 1958. Yeah, like, so if we want to do some quick math on this one, about 40% of the people polled are probably Republicans, right? And I'd be willing to bet that the number of people who don't approve of it skew in their favor. I doubt there are many like Democrats voting for Biden who don't approve of black-white marriage. Though I guess there I guess there are some black families that don't approve of their black children marrying white people, but I imagine that's a smaller proportion of the. Yeah, I imagine it's a smaller number. But man, 13% is a lot. Like, how do you feel about the idea that if you just randomly sampled Americans, about 1 in every 9 wouldn't approve of interracial marriage? That's a lot. It's a huge improvement from 1958. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's still weird to think about. Like 1 in 9. That's really weird. And then you also have to factor in something. This is something Trump supporters talk about a lot, so I feel comfortable mentioning it. There's the fear of social pressure factor. A lot of Trump supporters are like, actually, there are actually 80 trillion Trump supporters, and they just don't say that they are in phone polls because they know they'll get discriminated against for it. There is a lot of social reprisal to be faced in some communities if you're really fucking racist. So it's possible that a lot of that this number is a little inflated, you know, and it might be higher. It could be more. 13% is like 40 million. Yeah, that's a lot. Though, of course, I mean, again, we have to deal with like polling errors and the fact that we're not dealing with the total sample size and so on and so forth. In 2011, 46% of Mississippi GOP wanted to ban interracial relationships. Wait, is that true? Do you have a stat on that? Is that true? 46% of the Mississippi GOP? Do you have like a... I would need to see that. That is pretty bad. Will I ever run for office at any point? No, never. I mean, here? Okay. Let me see. Holy shit. Okay, well. Poll, 46% of Mississippi GOP want to ban interracial marriage. This is just from 10 years ago now, a decade ago. The question was, do you think interracial marriage should be legal or illegal? Shockingly, 46% of the state's GOP voters reported illegal. Not just they disapprove of it, illegal. They want the state to ban it. And 14% said not sure. So the actual number is 60% who don't support it. It's just from 10 years ago. From the same year I graduated high school. Wait. Yeah. Wait, really? Yeah. Wait. Yeah. Wow. 10 years ago. Man. Wild. Anyway. Yeah. The point that I'm trying to get at here is like, don't buy into the bullshit that people are exclusively motivated by like class animus. A lot of Republicans really just hate black people. They really do. It's that, like, it really is that simple. It's just a fear of black people. Why would you think any differently? Why do you think so many people were motivated to conservatism like 150 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago? Like, we have slavery for hundreds of years, and then we have a war over it in which, and half of the South in America still flies the Confederate flag, which is the flag of a traitorous nation that went to war and killed hundreds of thousands of people, specifically so they could continue to own slaves. In the state constitutions they drafted up, that was the specific reason that they went to war. They sacrificed hundreds of thousands of people because they wanted to own black people. Like, that's it. States' rights to do what, you know? And then they lost, like losers, and they had half their shit burned down, like losers. And we freed the slaves, and then you have sharecropping, you know, you have the Jim Crow era for like 100 years, and then you've like the Little Rock Nine, and like everyone's against interracial marriage, and like it keeps going. Why would you think after those hundreds of years that like all of a sudden racism would now be a thing of the past? Why would anyone think that? There are people alive today who would have been around during the civil rights movement to throw rocks at black people. There are people alive today who would have been able to do that. Like by a decent margin too. When was the civil? So if you were, yeah, if you're like 65 or 70 years old, you could have been conceivably like throwing rocks at black people back then. Yeah, like thereabouts, 60 to 70. There are tons of Americans who are that age. We have a huge boomer population because of the population boom after World War II. Age distribution of Americans. Can I get a chart, please? Here, how nice. It actually breaks into the group we're looking for. So according to this chart, in 2019, about 16% of the population is 65 years or older, which would be around the age you would need to be to have been like an adult or like a young man or woman or and be whatever during the civil rights movement. A lot of old people, yeah. Anyway, I don't know. It just bothers me. I have this memory. I cringe at myself when I think of this. I was like a little proto-class reductionist because when you're getting into the lefty biz, you know, it feels so liberal to talk about racial animus, you know, like the Republican Party is racist. Like, wow, you feel like a little Hillary Clinton growing inside of you. It just feels so reductionist, so virtue signaling. So you want to focus on more like leftist modes of analysis, like, you know, class analysis or like disparate material conditions. But and I remember when I was in when I was in college after Trump won, I was so eager to tell everyone. I was wondering, you know why Trump won? It's because the economic animus of the working class has gone unaddressed, and I was so excited to run around telling people about this. You know why? Because it made me different from the liberal explanation. It made me different. It made me different from the people who were saying Russia, Russia, Russia. It made me different from the people who were saying it was racism. It made me different from the people who were saying it was sexism. But man, the more I reflect on it, economic anxiety had very little to do with the support for Donald Trump. A lot of it really just is xenophobia and race baiting. Like, that's pretty much, especially now. 2016, it was more uneven. Now it's like 98% race baiting. That's like the whole fucking deal. Yeah. So anyway, I learned from my mistake. Just don't buy into the idea that because a mode of analysis is one shared by liberals, that it's not explanatory, you know? Like, it may not be explanatory, but you need to consider it off its own merits. Come on, buddy, it's because they hated Hillary and resented 8 years of Obama Fox News coverage, Rush. Well, yeah, there was definitely like a sexist. Wait, are you agreeing with me or disagreeing with me? I can't tell. Wait, yeah, obviously Hillary was a terrible candidate, but the reason why people vote for Trump, not against Hillary, but for Trump, I think has way more to do with racial animus than it does like class differences, you know? I really don't. When was the last time a Trump supporter talked about a class issue, you know? Even Tim Pool, who like signals at being this populist, doesn't talk about it like at all. It's culture war bullshit about how BLM is going to burn down every single white person's house or something. That's it, you know? Why do they talk about when do they talk about big corporations? It's exclusively in the context of big tech banning fucking Nazi accounts. That's it. That's the only time they talk about big corporations. But another consideration, they don't have any issue whatsoever with the stimulus getting cut. They don't have any issue whatsoever with the tax cuts for the wealthy. They don't. It's just not an economic issue. Well, they don't perceive it as an economic issue. Bush, I think there's a huge amount of that feeling forgotten by coastal elites crap that led to Trump in 2016. Well, no. Wait. Hold on. That's true, but it's not for the reason you think. That feeling forgotten by the coastal elites thing is the case, but the reason they feel forgotten isn't because they're poor. It's because they're white. That's the difference. If you look at the way they talk about coastal elites, it's not like wealthy Wall Street, because the strongest support for Trump comes from the suburbs. These are upper middle class people, you know? Poor people tend to vote in favor of Democrats, like pretty disproportionately. That feeling of being left behind isn't like you're being economically distanced. It's like all these black people and women and trans people are being put in media and you're being forced to be politically correct and stuff. The coastal elite is a cultural signifier, not a class one. Please don't become a race reductionist moron like Destiny. What does this have to do with race reductionism? That response is identical to the response that I get from liberals when I mention class analysis. So I mention class analysis, and they're like, don't become a class reductionist like all those stupid tankies. Like, why can't you just have these different ways of analyzing society and consider all of them and try to find which ones are most applicable in any given situation? Why do we have to fucking do team sports here, okay? Yeah, poor states, GOP, rich states, Dems, poor people, Dems, rich people, GOP. The problem is all the poorest states have like 5 people in them, so it's like super disproportionate. Wait, Vosh, is that inherently bad, though? You can make an argument that Biden's office is leaning so hard in diversity, the middle American white fear being snuffed out is given credit, which feels reminiscent of the same sentiment in 2016? No, I don't. Wait, yeah, it's inherently bad, yeah. If a president is like, we're going to implement milquetoast means-tested reforms to try to address disparate racial outcomes, and the white population throws their weight behind fascism, yeah, I would say that's probably pretty bad. Yeah. I don't give a fuck about this left behind by coastal elites thing from a bunch of out of touch yuppies who still like cringe every time they see a black person walking the same side of the street. I don't give a fuck about these people. I mean, I have to in terms of political consideration, but like in terms of their feelings, I don't give a single shit about these people. Also, if you can remember, Trump was losing against Ben Carson until they promised to ban Muslims. Every Republican primary is like that. Well, from now on, every Republican primary, I feel like, is going to be signaling fascism, and they're all going to like try to one-up each other, you know? It's going to be really fucking interesting, the future Republican primaries. They're going to keep trying to one-up one another. Like, oh yeah, you're going to ban all fucking trans people from the military? Okay, well, I'm not going to let black people in the military. Like, they're going to keep going up. Yeah, no, I'm more racist. It's going to be fun, you know?